Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lanore.
This is Science for Humans with Dr. Jeff Golini.
How you doing, Dr. Jeff?
I'm doing good, Carl. 10 years. Wow, that's awesome.
I know. You know what? It only feels like 9.5.
And I did like that music.
Made that, Dr. Jeff, I made that music sitting at my kitchen table. I downloaded the original theme from the Superman show that you and I grew up watching as kids.
Uh-huh.
And I just inserted my voice in the different spots. And I thought, this is so campy. It's so fun. No one's going to take it seriously. They'll all have a good laugh about it. And it really, I used that for almost 2 years for the intro until I could scratch enough money together to get a professional company to produce an intro for me.
That was pretty good.
I know. It's funny. It was funny. So there you go. How are you, Dr. Jeff?
I'm doing well, for mid-May, I believe it is.
You got to be flying high. I got a press release that says that a peer-reviewed study that you published is now going to be released in the Emory University School of Medicine's journal. Is that correct?
It is. There's just so many things happening all at once. But this came in yesterday. Big medical school. They're one of the top places that people go to. And they were so intrigued by some of the research on crealkaline that, they approved and peer-reviewed it in kind of like record time because they wanted to get it out there. But it's a pretty interesting study, and it's a great place to be published.
Real brief, this study looks at the use of crealkaline in concert with cisplatin, which is a chemotherapy, right?
Correct. There was quite a bit of medicated cellular toxicity studies that we did, along with, things that you don't think about, protein synthesis, and just overall cell membrane behavior. So really looking more at creatine from, the medical standpoint instead of us always thinking about from an athletic standpoint.
And the Reader's Digest version is that taking crealkaline while undergoing chemotherapy provides some protective mechanisms for the patient?
That's kind of it.
Wow, that's awesome.
Full study I think they're actually they fast-tracked it, so it looks like it might even be like in the next week or two. So I think we'll have the full study released here shortly.
Well, congratulations. Kudos to you. And you know what? And I'll tell you really more importantly why congratulations, because what started out as a sports supplement company is now making contributions to mainstream medicine. And that says a lot about the people, the founders, you've been doing this for AAP has been around for how long now?
Yeah, this is 30 years for us. And it was kind of funny, not to get off topic of gluten, but, when I first brought out crealkaline, people said, oh, this is a fad. It's only going to last for a couple months. And they didn't really understand, what it was all about. We might have to have another show and re-talk about that.
I think we do, because I think still people don't get it. They're like, oh, big deal, baking soda and creatine. No, that's not what this is. This is not that.
Way more complex.
Yeah. And we'll add that to the show list here. But let's get on to an important subject that's in everybody's front view, and that is gluten. So what exactly is gluten, Dr. Jeff?
And you're right, Carl. This is the biggest buzzword out at the Expo West in Anaheim. Everybody was talking gluten-free. So a lot of us has heard about it, but, we really don't know what it is unless you've been diagnosed with it. But gluten, refers to the proteins that are found in wheat endosperm. It's a type of tissue that's produced in seeds and typically ground into flour. And what it's used for and why it's there is, it nourishes the plant embryos during germination, but it also affects the elasticity of the dough. And that's what kind of makes bread, gives that chewy taste. So wheat gluten is really important in baking.
Well, in fact, when I was a kid, growing up, and also when I was in college, I worked for my cousin Giovanni, who had a pizzeria in Floral Park, Long Island, or Queens, depending on how you want to look at it. And we used to get big 50-pound bags. Now, I didn't know what it meant back then, but a high gluten flour. They make pizza with a type of flour that has higher concentrations of gluten than regular flour.
And exactly. And gluten is good. It's a good source of protein. It's just unfortunately people do have some intolerances. And there's a couple types of proteins that are found in that gluten, which is kind of where it gets tricky, because these things have been crossbred and show up in a lot of different stuff. But 18 million people in the United States have some form of gluten intolerance. And the most well-known form of gluten intolerance is something called celiac disease, which affects 1 in every 141 Americans.
That's a lot. For people who don't realize, 1 in 141 is a significant number of people.
Yeah, and it's it's basically an immune response that damages the intestines. So, it can cause some really nasty things, and then there's some minor things. And one of the things I want to kind of stress is that, as we were talking about gluten, just don't go on a gluten-free diet, because you got to remember that a lot of the gluten-free foods are nutrient deficient. So a lot of the medical industry is concerned that, people are just going to jump on the gluten-free bandwagon, and then we're going to have all these other deficiencies because, everybody's eating gluten-free when they really don't need to. So essentially, gluten is not bad for you. It's actually good for you. Unfortunately, people just have gluten intolerances, which mean their bodies produce an abnormal response while they're trying to break down that gluten during that digestion process.
And as you pointed out, through the hybridization and the breeding process to make wheat more robust in a growing environment, they've kind of mutated what wheat is. There's some ancient grains out there that people who have gluten intolerances seem to do well with. One of them is spelt. So don't immediately assume that all things that have gluten act the same way in the body.
Exactly. And everybody is different, because there's 2 strains, even though that, spelt is on the gluten list, it's really difficult. We're going to talk later in the show about, how to make a decision if you think you're gluten intolerant. But yeah, gluten is found in a lot of things. Wheat is the number one thing, but then the off breeds like, rye, barley, related grain.
Oatmeal has gluten in it, right?
Yep. Triticale, oatmeal. A lot of people, there's a big controversial on whether or not oats contain gluten, but a lot of people have the reaction to oats. So, oats have been added to the list. But probably the most dangerous thing for people who are gluten intolerant is not, staying away from, wheats and breads and things, but it's all the hidden stuff that you find it in. I mean, most all processed food has, thickening agents, flours. Sometimes you wouldn't think pasta, but, tortilla chips, wraps, most all fried fruit.
Let me take it a step further. So we know that if a mother drinks something and then breastfeeds, the baby gets some of it, right?
Right.
Okay. So if they feed cows grains and then milk them and put that milk on a store shelf and you drink it, guess what's in that milk? Even though they're not testing for gluten, and none of the milk is ever going to say gluten-free because nobody's up with this yet, but eggs and dairy can have gluten depending on the diet of the animal producing them.
Absolutely. And this is interesting because August 5th, 2014, FDA stepped in with a new legislation, and they are now requiring packaged foods to, be labeled new guidelines for saying gluten-free, because so many people are gluten. So they're allowing now, it has to be 20 parts per million. But guess what? That's only for packaged foods and dietary supplements. The FDA did not apply this to alcoholic beverages, cosmetics, prescription and non-prescription drugs, pet foods, and anything related to the agriculture, such as meat and poultry.
See? They always do this.
What's up with that? It's like, come on. There's so many Americans, and the FDA is saying that, it's closer to 20 million Americans, yet, only the food and the supplement industry is regulated, but everybody else, You're taking a shot. And, people wouldn't think that medications, but a lot of the binders, are wheat based.
How do you like that? And, talking about dairy and eggs for a second, there are a lot of people out there who have allergic reactions to dairy and eggs, and they are also gluten sensitive. I don't believe they're allergic to dairy and eggs. I believe they're allergic to the gluten that is residual in dairy and eggs. And if they go and find a farmer that produces dairy from grass-pastured cows and chickens that lead a normal life and can eat worms and their own poop and stuff like that, you won't have the allergic reactions to those.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I feel bad for people, who are extreme gluten intolerant, because it is really difficult. You can't just depend on the labels saying gluten free, because like you said, you wouldn't think about, eggs and milk and meats containing gluten. But, if you're very sensitive and you have those type of reactions, you're going to have to look for some cows, huh?
You know what the other end of this spectrum is, Dr. Jeff? And I actually laugh about this regularly. You walk into a restaurant and you order something. I'm being facetious now. Hey, can I have a glass of water? Would you like gluten-free water? Like, water is already gluten-free. They're using the word gluten-free on things that we know are gluten-free, but they're doing that so that they can charge more for it.
But think about this. I was at a restaurant the other night where they were making their rolls, and, they got it rolled out and they got flour on the table. Contains gluten, and this flour is all in the air. So is their water really gluten-free?
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's kind of like, going into these natural grocery stores where you got bulk. Stay away from those bulk, because, those scoops are being rotated around, and that's a big source of cross-contamination.
Interesting.
Let it known. Just, again, that flour gets in the air, and people who are extremely sensitive, that's all it takes is a little bit. They don't need to eat a loaf of bread,
Yeah.
So you got to be careful.
Why don't we do this? Let's take our break, and when we come back, let's go ahead and talk about how you know if you are gluten intolerant and what you can do about it. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right, we'll take one quick commercial break. You're listening to Science for Humans. We're talking about gluten. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Have you tried Carbolin yet? It's what the pros use. At EFX Sports, we know athletes and we know what it takes to safely fuel their performance. That's why we created Carbolin, the ultimate formulated to win carbohydrate drink. Whether you want to quickly carb load before a big competition or you want to recover faster after a workout, Carbolin is the answer. Carbolin is sugar-free, gluten-free, and caffeine-free. Best of all, you can try Carbolin right now absolutely free. Just head over to getcarbolin.com and sign up to receive a free sample of this amazing carbohydrate formula. Once again, that's getcarbolin.com. GetCarbolyn.com.
Move over, superheroes. This is the Superhuman Channel.
Welcome back to Science for Humans with Dr. Jeff Golini. We're talking about gluten. So we identified that gluten is a protein. It's naturally occurring in lots of things and also residually occurring in lots of other things, and you pretty much can't get out of its way. So if you're one of those poor, unfortunate people that's gluten sensitive, I feel for you. The rest of you will survive just fine with the occasional ingestion of gluten. What do people experience if they are gluten insensitive? What should they look for, Dr. Jeff?
Probably the biggest one that, again, is non-lethal is just digestive issues, gas, bloating, and then even, diarrhea, constipation. Constipation is real common amongst children. And then you get into some of the kurtosis paralysis, which they call chicken skin. And this is interesting because this is a result of a fatty acid deficiency and a vitamin A deficiency, because the gut is actually damaged from this gluten, which also leads to, vitamin deficiencies, unable to absorb, your vitamins, your drugs. So big deficiencies, B12, all your fat soluble, your A, D, E, K, folic acid, iron, calcium, magnesium. People can get, iron deficiencies from these. And then some other common ones are, fatigue. They call it brain fog, or, just feeling tired. And again, a lot of these symptoms are common to a lot of health diseases. That's why it's so difficult, for doctors to say you're gluten intolerant without actually doing some further investigation. But there's a lot of the autoimmune diseases, neurologic symptoms such as dizziness or feeling off balance. Doctors are now finding, hormone imbalances, PMS, PCOS. Migraine headaches is a big source now of gluten. Chronic fatigues, fibromyalgias, inflammation, swelling, pain at joints, fingers, knees, hips. I mean, again, things that you are associated with other types of diseases.
Yeah, like they look like rheumatoid arthritis sometimes.
Yeah, mood issues, anxiety, depression, mood swings, chronic irritability. So I mean, there are so many symptoms that are caused by this gluten, and everybody is kind of affected, from a different standpoint or a different degree.
So, do you think the gut issues are reversible? Do they go away after a while, you think, if you cut it out?
I think it would be, I mean, if you get to where the gut is extremely damaged, again, that's a good question. But I think for most people, I think it is. I think you can heal anything up. So I think, if you do have some issues with absorption, if you identify that gluten is the cause of that, I think your body will heal that up for you,
Is there anything you can do if you do have a gluten intolerance? Should you be supplementing with certain things? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you got to figure out if you are. Again, you can go to the doctor, but I think it's easy just to do it yourself because, again, this is something new and it's just exploding like wildfire. But the best thing to do is to make a list of all your ailments, your symptoms, your nags, and don't discount anything, well, my back's sore today because I must have sat wrong. Put down a list of everything that's ailing and then go on a gluten-free diet for 60 days and see how you feel. See if some of those symptoms have decreased or even gone away. And then if you're not really sure, go back on your normal diet and see if those things rebound back. And, again, if you find that, you are better, then it's gluten. And a lot of people, after about 6 months of being on gluten-free, can gradually start to incorporate back some of those foods that they may have abandoned and find that, it was only maybe it was just bread or rye that really affected you. So unfortunately, it's really a trial and error to figure out if you're gluten-free.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, personally, I avoid gluten. I'm one of those people who does avoid gluten, and I haven't been diagnosed with celiac disease. However, I can tell you with pinpoint accuracy that if I eat bread, I will become bloated and have a sour taste in my mouth. And if I don't eat it, I don't get that. If I eat crackers, pita bread, any of those, if I eat a flour-based product, even pizza, it bloats the heck out of me. Now, I don't know if the microbes in my gut are dysregulated and they are, as a result, feeding on these things, or if it's the gluten, but all I know is I do better when I stay away from breads and pastas and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the hardest thing is a lot of people that I've talked to about this say, oh man, I can't give up breads. Well, they say, the things that you are addicted to are normally the things that you have allergies to. So that's kind of an indication. But someone asked me, well then, geez, what can I eat for a carbohydrate? So here's some things that, are gluten-free. Sweet potatoes. Most, bodybuilders and athletes know about sweet potatoes. And they do make a gluten-free oatmeal. So there are some companies who are now actually testing their oatmeal to be gluten-free. Rice is a great choice. Brown is always healthier than white, but at the end of the day, rice is rice. Quinola and of course beans, other than, the gluten-free pastas and the gluten-free breads. I haven't tried those, so I'm not sure if they taste like cardboard or are they good.
Well, because of the gluten-free industry drive, we're finding so many alternatives to flour-based cracker type products, things that are crunchy, and chip type products. There's so many things out there that are made with coconut flour, almond flour. The list goes on and on. So you don't have to give up quote unquote bread. You just may have to give up bread made from wheat. There's lots of alternatives out. And then the jury is still out on sprouted grain bread. So sprouted grain bread was written about in the Bible. They let the grain, look, we know that the seed has to protect itself. So there's anti-nutrients in there designed to keep animals from eating the seeds. But once it sprouts into a plant, those anti-nutrients are lost. So the theory is that if you let it sprout and then use it to make your flours out of, that it's not as harmful. Do you have any theories on that? I mean, that's a lot of people believe that.
Well, I think you're exactly right. I mean, the gluten is in there during that germination process, so it makes sense that once that grain has sprouted, that protein is gone. So, and that's why a lot of people can eat those. Again, I think it depends on, how sensitive. If you just get a little occasional gas or bloating, then you probably are okay. But if you are extremely intolerant, then, if you're allergic to meats and dairy, then you probably, will have some issues with those,
Yeah. So there you have it. That's the story on gluten. Also, congratulations on having this research published. And we do have to do another show on Crealkaline, I think. I think a lot of people just don't get how sophisticated of a supplement it really is.
I think that's a good idea. Well, thanks, Carl, and hope that helps everyone who has been hearing about gluten. If you have any questions, you can always go to Ask the Scientist at Superhuman Radio.
Yeah, send us an email. Thanks a lot, Dr. Jeff.
Thank you.
Take care.